All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another conversation on the We Outside live cast. And as always, when we pop out, we have a special guest. And normally it's virtual, but we have the privilege and we have the honor of being with Kaz here in person today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Kaz to the show.
Thank you.
Originally from Kansas City, we're definitely going to get into that. Happens to be in town, and sometimes it's all about timing, right? So happy to have you here on the We Outside Livecast. For anybody just tapping in, we are an authentic platform. We just let the conversation goes where it goes. We're just here to have a human conversation, get to know the special guest that we have out here today in Cass, as the human, as well as him as the artist as well. So we're very much going to tap into some things there because this is someone that y'all got to start paying attention to. So Kaz, welcome. We appreciate you stopping through today. Kansas City rapper, originally from Kansas City.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us, I'm just curious, for you in your own words, because you could only really let the people know in your own words who you truly are. If you want to take the time and just let people know who you are, what you're about.
I'm a Kansas City rapper. I'm born and raised in Kansas City. I've been out west for probably a decade, doing a lot of hip hop in Los Angeles and as well in Arizona. So I put out my debut album, Hip Hop Head, this year. So, been promoting videos and doing some podcasts and that kind of stuff.
Man, there you go. And that's we're certainly going to talk about that as well, because a lot of people don't understand, especially if they're first maybe breaking into the industry, specifically as an independent artist, right? There's a lot of work. You don't just pick up a microphone, do a song, and expect things to happen, right? There's a lot of grind, and on the business side that goes into it, from the marketing standpoint, like you said, putting this out here, this year, and just continuing to make sure that you're promoting it. So what's something that you've maybe taken from that experience thus far, the business side of music and artistry and entertainment as a whole to this point?
With the social media aspect of things, there's a lot of people with platforms. There's a lot of competition. It's a saturated game. So if you want to make any type of dent, you got to be willing to spend some money, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be able to create a lot of content quickly. And, I'm lucky to have a team of people that work, on my side that are knowledgeable about that stuff. And so I get a lot of help in that area. And as far as the creative, I like to just build up as many songs as I can. I try to just keep writing and write about stuff that happens to me,
No, I think there's a lot of relatability with respect to that authenticity that you speak of, right? Knowing that you need a team around you to get certain things accomplished, because there's the vision that we have as creatives, right? But something that might go into that overall in that process of the business side of things that you kind of spoke on earlier is the fact that there might be somebody who that's their wheelhouse, right? So as long as they understand your vision, then you can delegate accordingly, right? That way you don't have to juggle a bunch of balls, because there's already, like you just said, between content for social media, doing it quickly, doing a lot,
right,
on top of continuing to be creative on a constant basis, it's a balance, right? Yeah. It's a balance. And you mentioned team. Team is important. So let's talk about the team that put together this album that you dropped, Hip Hop Head, earlier this year. And where can people find it before we even answer that part? Where can people find the album right now?
Castofhiphop.com is the website. And then, I'm on all the platforms, Spotify and Apple and all that. YouTube, put out a lot of videos. This album was really a storytelling album of my hip hop journey from, when I started as a kid, really more into rock and punk rock and reggae and a lot of other types of music. And I just hung out with a lot of people that were into hip hop, and I slowly, became a hip hop head, as the years went by. So, I've got some friends on the album. JPZ's on the album. JP Cali Smooth, who's a top level battle rapper from the Los Angeles battle rap scene, is on there. We got some JPZ beats on there. Several other producers.
Nice.
So it's really kind of a front to back story if you have the time to listen to albums front to back these days. And I think it's well rounded in that I've got some sort of serious stuff and some silly stuff and some, I try to keep it light. Um, but yeah, I think I'm proud of the project. It's good.
I think that's important at the end of the day as artists, right? Like being proud of the project that you put out, right? Because it sounds like, just from the early stages of this conversation, that you abide to the principles of hip hop, right? You're not just a rapper, but you sound like an individual who follows the understanding and underlying principles of what really it is to be a hip hop head themselves as well. And I think there's an appreciation there for a lot of people that's watching this. That authenticity really stands out, but most importantly, when you abide to what hip hop really is, it hits differently. Would you agree with that? And how do you feel that's important for individuals who follow you through music or other avenues? What role does that kind of play into your creative arts when you're giving back to what hip hop really is?
I think it plays a big role. I'm highly influenced by the artists that I listened to growing up. And the artists that I idolized when I was younger, they all gave props to the artists that came before them. The ones who started hip hop. So I make sure that I'm reflecting those people in the same way. I've had different phases, I think, with all different types of hip hop. And I try to be super open minded when it comes to any music creation. Really, if you're out there and you're putting your art out in the world, even if it doesn't necessarily, resonate with me in the way that my favorites do, I still give it credit where it's due, for sure.
There's a respect, there's an appreciation there. Yeah. I can appreciate that, man. Originally from being from the Northeast, I'm a Red Sox fan, right? So yeah, I'm sure sports, right? The Red Sox-Yankees rivalry. Like, yeah, I may dislike that team, but at this point, 27 world championships or something like that. There's got to be an appreciation and respect for that, right? So sure. I like how you broke that down and put that together. Where did the album really start for you, Hip Hop Head? Because you certainly spoke about the team behind it and what it went into put that together, but I'm definitely curious, where did that journey, and concept kind of originate from?
Sure. Well, the track Hip Hop Head, that's the first track on the album, I think was really the first song that, maybe not the first one on the album I wrote, but close. And it was the one that gave me the idea for the direction of the whole album, to start with, my influences. And then sort of tell the tale as it went along, my years performing with JPZ and doing stuff here, and then moving out west and meeting all the rap people that I got to meet out there, and just sort of my experience with that. And then on to being a dad rapper. I've got a bunch of kids. I'm busy. I'm not writing the same type of songs that I wrote when I was 20. Mm-hmm. So just a maturation, I suppose,
which I think is important as an artist, right? That growth, that maturization that you mentioned, right? Because that's how you elevate. Otherwise, you kind of just get stuck in maybe one mind frame. And you kind of said it and alluded to earlier. There's different levels to things in general, right? And if you always want to, just continue to improve, well, how do you not improve without having that elevation,
sure,
and that growth? But most importantly, the understanding of it, right? Which I think is hugely important. A couple other things that you've done recently. Just a couple weeks ago, you dropped Just Like Slim.
Yep.
I have definitely had the opportunity to check that out. I know where it originated from, at least a part of it, anyways. But how did that come about? I assume you're a fan of Slim Shady, aka Eminem.
Actually, I wrote that song the day that there was a leak that happened maybe a year or two ago. Do you remember this? Somebody at his studio released a whole bunch of songs. And which I understand probably pissed him off, but I was in a great mood. I got a whole bunch of new Eminem songs to listen to.
Yep.
And so that day I was just going through beats, and that hook, just kind of hit me. That's really just a copy of his, don't you want to grow up to be just like me? And it's really kind of making fun of myself because, trying to be just like Slim when you're in high school is maybe not the best idea and can lead to some poor decision making. So
has its pros and cons like anything else,
yeah,
right?
for sure. But it's also, a huge influence on me, among other rappers. We released that with the Timing of the Stands documentary.
Correct.
And I don't feel like I'm a stan for sure, but I can identify with, being a huge fan of somebody so much that it influences your life, and there's several other rappers that I would consider in that same position for me, just from the same era: Nas, Tupac, Jay-Z, Bun B. There's a lot of rappers that I listened to growing up that were lyrical and really influenced me to be a storyteller above all things.
I like that you said that word storyteller, because I would agree with what you just said about those individuals as well. And another thing that I would agree to or agree with, and you didn't necessarily say it in this way, but you said it, like, music has power, right? Music has power to heal. Music has power to bring people together at the end of it all in some way, shape, or form, negatively or positively. And it certainly sounds like you use that for the message of the healing and the knowledge and lessons that music can teach as well. So I appreciate how you put it. I'm not necessarily a stan, but at the same time, I have an appreciation, because not a lot of people will come out on records and say shit like that. And the appreciation, could come in a lot of different forms or ways too, right? Whether it's the message connecting with you on a personal level, whether it's an individual that gives you the power to say, well, shit, if that dude's saying something, man, maybe that gives me power to say something as well. And you certainly spoke on how individuals have influenced you kind of growing up. Have any of them influenced you in a way where you're just like, yo, man, fuck it? Because you said, I was kind of making fun of myself in a way, right? And, obviously we know what fake media could be and social media and what that plays out to today. Has there ever been a point where you're like, you're wondering if you should post something out there, right? And then, like, how individuals maybe have influenced you, or where that growth came from to say, fuck it, man, I don't care no more. This is what I'm doing. I'm passionate about this shit. I'm just gonna, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I make a lot of songs, in the privacy of my own studio at home, and I don't always put those out. Sometimes I'm just making really silly stuff that's just completely for me. But yeah, I think you got to be willing to make fun of yourself first and foremost, especially if you're going to make fun of anybody else. And I'm a ridiculous character, so it's not hard to make fun of myself. But these artists that I loved growing up would, on the one hand, be self-detrimental, and then on the next song tackle a completely serious subject that really hits home. And I feel like I did that on Hip Hop Head. I love making silly, ridiculous songs, but I understand it has to be a mix of all the, to give a well-rounded view of who you are. You gotta really express some of the sad feelings and some of the, fear that comes with being a person.
That's very true, and that's that relatability that we could go back to, right? As far as connecting with fans and what you're out here doing. And even fans that might have a high prolific profile in certain areas, especially certainly where you grew up. And I know some individuals that you definitely looked up to and were inspired by, living here locally in Kansas City, growing up. And recently you had one of those individuals pop up on you on one of your filmings, right?
The Popper's shown a lot of love, man. He's a really dope Kansas City rapper. I have a lot of respect for these dudes that have been around here doing it for a long time. And I got asked, I did a podcast a few days ago, and they brought up the top 5 thing that's been happening around here, which I vaguely was aware of, to be honest. And I gave them my off the top, top 5. But after I left, I was really thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? I think it's important to point out that if you're a Kansas City rapper and you're doing this at all, you should be supportive of all the other Kansas City rappers, because, Kansas City is still sort of waiting for their real moment. And I feel like they are so close compared to 10 or 20 years ago when we were performing and doing stuff around town. And it was great back then.
Mm-hmm.
But man, if all of these Kansas City artists came together as one and all showed love to each other and shit, you know, it's time.
I agree. And a lot of people, and again, I was telling you before we came on camera that, you know, I just moved here 7 months ago, but anytime that my family and I are maybe thinking about a new place, I do a lot of information, all kinds of research on everything that goes on. And, you know, doing what I do, that was very important to me from the music aspect as well. So getting to know a lot of people, and some I've had the privilege and pleasure to get to meet in person along the way. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the world in general, but to your point, in your own backyard, right? Like, do you feel that, like, because to your point, bro, there is so much great music and entertainment and art going on here. Like
Food,
bro. Like we moved from Colorado a couple years ago before Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Me and wifey Pete were like, had we known about Kansas City before moving to Oklahoma City, hands down, we wouldn't. There's culture here.
Yeah.
There's life here. There's realness. There's authenticness here as well. And there's a lot of that from what I've experienced thus far. Do you feel that the energies, that come with that, do you think there's almost like a blocking of blessings, like for the city as a whole? What do you think it'll take, or any advice that you have in the sense of, we can work together, we can collaborate, like truly authentically collaborate, like let's eat together, if it's a pure intent, just any thoughts that you have on what maybe the missing link is. Sure. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's like professional sports. There's going to be a lot of egos involved when it comes to stuff like this. And I think that's just part of the growing process for a city that's really coming to the, to the edge of really being considered one of those hip hop cities. So I'm not entirely worried about that, but I think we're real close. I think it's every time I come back and I go through these circles and kind of network with all these hip hop people, it's just such a good feeling. Like there's just so many good, videographers and engineers and producers and rappers and singers and dancers. And I mean, the whole thing, it's every time I come back, it just feels like it's even better than it was the time before. And I can just feel it. It's like an electric buzz around here. Tech Nine's still doing his thing as our top tier guy. And we just got all these dudes now. It just seems like there's so many more than there was 10 or 20 years ago. And it's exciting. No,
I can appreciate it. Bump Jonas will Sprinkle Some Salt podcast. He's been known, and he definitely let me know he took it from somewhere. But Kansas City's been called like the Paris and the Plains, right? And I would have to agree with everything, right? And I appreciate what you said, that it's entertainment as a whole, especially when it comes to this hip hop thing and rapping specifically. It's a competition, right? Everybody's got some kind of ego. You can't do certain things unless you have an ego. Everybody has one. It's just a matter of how they utilize it and what builds that character, from what they perceive to have people to be. With the authenticity that you carry, how important is that to you? Because, the way a lot of people put it, it's like, hey, man, I would at least want sustainability, right? Let's just call it sustainability of being able to continue to be the creative that I want to be and elevate in that journey as well. How important to you is it when you're going through your music making process, just to make sure that, you're giving messages specifically to individuals that want to hear maybe like a certain type of message, kind of being in tune with your fans as your experience has been in growing your following as well?
Look, I just try to do what is in my heart, authentically me. I feel like that's the answer. It's always the answer. If you just do exactly what it is that you want to do, at the end of the day, there's going to be some, even if it's not what they want to do, I think other people recognize that you're being authentically yourself, whatever that is. And that encourages other people to do the same thing.
Man, I appreciate that. And that brings me back to what you were talking about as far as having that electric buzz. And despite anything that, again, might be going on social media, there's really something happening here in Kansas City. And I think, with your intent of being authentic, gets you in the right circles that could create those opportunities, right? Because again, nothing is ever handed really ultimately to anybody. It's all about opportunity and then what you do as you, the individual, with those opportunities, right? I mean, like, it's not just like, here you go. And even in those scenarios, right? Like somebody going viral online, that you don't just post one thing and it happens, right? You still have to create your own opportunities as well. And I think you just kind of keep those blinders on. You're going to be fine because you can block out that outside noise. Is there any special way that you do that? Do you just look at, like, for example, social media as just like the business aspect of it? How do you just try to create your own narrative of just what you're hearing, what you're seeing in general out there?
Yeah, I mean, social media is a great tool to allow other people to see what it is that you're doing. I try to, it's not my go-to. I'm from the earlier generation, obviously. It's something that I got to be kind of, dragged along to do, but I'll do it. I don't mind sharing my process with the world and, sharing the art. For a long time, I just did this stuff for myself and my friends, and we just, had fun with it. But, lucky enough to have a really great team around me, they've kind of showed me what it really actually takes to do this stuff. And it's, we've been at it a long time. So, to just now finally be actually employing these tools in the correct way is another self-deprecating chance for myself. I like to make fun of how much of a dad I feel like sometimes doing this when, there's tons of young people out here doing this. And when I was that age, we didn't want the older folks hanging around and doing that stuff.
Yeah.
But times have changed because now there's the internet. Everybody has a niche. There's plenty of room for everybody to love the stuff they love. And this nostalgia rap thing is coming around. I had Fat Bastard and Beavis and Butthead in my songs, and the kind of stuff that people my age will crack up at and be like, oh yeah, that's
No, and I think that's important, to be in tune with, like we talked about, yourself as far as what you want to put out there, but your fans as well. And the creative process is a very fun one. Where did it ultimately start for you, that creative journey? I mean, you certainly spoke about influences and kind of your journey to becoming a hip hop head. But when was it when you were like, because everybody fucks around a little bit, right?
Sure.
Along the way, that was kind of part of my journey in the beginning. But like when you were just like, yo, I want to do this shit. I want to create. I want to get down with the fucking get down. You know what I mean? When did that happen for you?
Well, I mean, I'd have to be honest. It started when I was very young. My mom used to force me to read, which I think is the key to all this. And I do the same thing with my kids. She would take us to the library, and my siblings and I would pick out a number of books. And then it was, you're going home and you're sitting in your room for the next 2 hours reading, which I liked to scream and yell about as a kid, but I actually liked it. And now that I'm an adult, I read a lot. I think it, there's no doubt it helps me with, being able to write rhymes. But yeah, then I spent a lot of my youth being in punk rock bands and emo bands and, listening to Tool and Deftones and, punk rock and just I really sort of prepping myself for the time that I would actually be writing poetry, essentially, is what we do, right? But there was a certain moment in time, I think sometime in high school, when I'd never really considered rapping at all. It wasn't something that I did. And I started hanging around some people who did it. And I was like, wait, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I started having fun with it. And then, because of the rappers that I listened to growing up, in particular Nas, who just will tell a story like nobody's business.
Yes.
It started challenging me to take a situation that pissed me off or made me happy or whatever, and see if I could put it into a story form on a beat that would have people going, wow. So that's the goal, man. If you can do that stuff and take all those tools that you've picked up along the way and employ them to making stuff that touches people in whatever way it does, then I've succeeded.
Man, and that's exactly what it is. And I think that's something that people don't necessarily realize is part of that authenticity, right? Like why I actually do it, where it started. I think it's important, especially as you're elevating and just growing your following as well, to let people know the origin, of that. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Cool.
because it is part of the journey, right? And then that elevation continues to come. I saw in one of your posts recently, and you already kind of even mentioned it, from where you started with music in general and that punk and that rock background, in addition to hip hop. How does having that well-roundedness and understanding of the different genres of music that you do, how does that help you in your creative process, or help and or influence you
Sure.
in your creative process, and maybe just taking everything that you know but making it your own?
Well, I'd say the biggest one is, punk rock's rebellious nature is very similar to hip hop. So my desire to challenge, the status quo, I guess, however you want to say it. Just whenever there's stuff going on in the world that it's funny to mock or talk about or whatever, that's definitely a punk rock thing, and it was echoed in hip hop as well. I do some singing as well, and so sometimes there's a song on the album where it's definitely not very hip hop. It's more like singing and sort of pop sounding. So I try to take all those things I've loved over the years and kind of mix it into one.
No, and I think that's important for people to realize as well, because you said something there that struck a conversation with somebody that you mentioned earlier, Jay Peasy, as far as when you're like, there's a little singing in there, poppy. I think it's important, depending on what your goals are, with any type of art that you're doing, but specifically, the art of hip hop, being a rapper, like you do want to make sure that your messages are reaching different avenues while still, because when you talk about sustainability, that means you got to make some coin, right? It's not cheap to go, because all the time that goes into the planning process, the writing process, that you're doing in theory for that love and that passion of it and the vision that you had. But now it's like, shit, okay, now I got to hit Jay Peasy up for a beat, or I got to hit this one up for a beat, whatever the case might be, and start to reach out to that team that you've been talking about, right? All right, hey, yo, this is the vision. Let's go. This is what I'm seeing. What are your thoughts as well? So with respect to, having that process grow from the pop standpoint, right? How important do you, and I'm just using that word in general, but how important do you feel it is for, whether it be yourself or other artists out there, to put something that can be consumed by like the masses, right? Jay Peasy once put it to me in the sense where he's like, he's like, the New York Times, writes at a fourth grade reading level. Why? So it's more accessible to people. So what do you feel the importance of at least having maybe like one or two of those, to put still with your messaging out there, right? To bring people into to that real, message that you're trying to tell in a whole project, for example.
I think that's a method that I learned from the rappers of the 90s that I loved. Nas and Jay and Eminem, they always had at least two songs on there that were good for radio play. The rest was filled with, more niche type stuff. So I try to keep it well-rounded.
No, I think it's important because you can speak to a larger audience there when it comes down to as well. So obviously, you're here in Kansas City. Just wrapped up a project the other day with respect to some filming. What are you in the midst of right now? Like, what's the next steps for what you've got going on with respect to your music journey, in addition to what we've already talked about?
Well, while we're promoting the Hip Hop Head album, I'm fully engaged in making this next album. I already got a bunch of songs for it, so I'll just keep making music, and then when it's time to put the album together, I'll be able to pick and choose from those tracks and kind of put together a good project and be ready to go.
That's what it's all about, man. What else? Is there anything that we didn't talk about today, man? I mean, again, this is your show. I want to make sure at the end of the day, anything that we didn't touch, I know we've touched on a lot of topics thus far, but anything that we haven't touched on, or anything that you want the people outside to know, they should know. They already know, bro.
The Jay Peasy produced Tech Nine album that's out right now.
15 and 16 Forest.
And I owe a lot to Jay Peasy for all the things that he's taught me over the years in regards to hip hop and the lessons he's learned. So everybody needs to listen to that Tech album if you haven't. It's incredible.
Couple times. I've heard it a couple times. It's dope.
Yeah, Kansas City, man, I like seeing it happen.
That's what it's about. And you know, I'm gonna talk about JPZ real quick, or ask about JPZ. What's that process? Because everybody's experience with somebody else is different, right? Mine was, man, it was extremely eye opening to me. Extremely eye opening to me. Having the ability, because you and him go back a while,
Yeah.
right? You and him go back a while. Being able to work with somebody who's classically trained, right? Like he is. I mean, that dude knows his shit, man.
Yes.
What's it like being able to work with somebody like of that caliber, who is well-rounded with respect to his mind and understanding of music?
Sure.
And is it different for you, maybe, since you've known him for so long and you've kind of grown, in that respect?
Yeah, it's different. He's more like a brother than an associate, a business associate.
Yep.
But watching him spend all these years working as hard as he has to then be able to produce an entire Tech Nine album, which is something that we dreamed about as young people. It's just incredible. It's really awesome, and it's shown me that if you really believe something hard enough and you work for it, it's probably going to happen. And he's, that's only a stepping stone in the career of JPZ, I'm sure. There'll be a lot more stuff. He's on Medication on my album. It's a great song. Hope everybody hears it.
Man, we're going to make sure that we are dropping all that information in this conversation today. That's not a problem, because again, you guys just do it right. You do it authentically. And as a fan of art, as a fan of hip hop as well, it's appreciated, kind of to the points that you've been making, right? Where you're staying true to that. You're staying humble, and paying that homage that you were talking about earlier to the pioneers and the people that set the table. And I think that's something, I don't know, man. I just feel there's something in the air where there almost seems like to be a shift of that happening, right? I mean, you kind of talked about earlier with respect to, that nostalgia hip hop, kind of making a turn. Things are cyclical, right? And I don't know, man. I've seen it out there a little bit too. What are your feelings as far as what might next be for, let's call it the next era of hip hop, right? Like most people out here would say, yo, the 90s and that time frame was the golden era, right? This era that we're kind of coming out of, I kind of just refer to it as the influential era myself, right? And I'm telling people the shift that I'm feeling is we're going into the crystal clear era, right? Like back to what it was really about. Are you feeling any of that from just what you're experiencing, with the moves that you make and the circles that you surround yourself with? We get to hear things. We get to hear the vibe of what might be coming next in some cases. Or are you feeling that we're going back more to what the 90s kind of feel was? Because that's going to remain its own era, right? But like the crystal clear era where shit gets real again. Yeah. Is you feeling any of that at all?
I don't know the answer to that, honestly, because it feels like that sometimes. And then I listen to what my kids are listening to and I'm like, I don't have any idea what's going on. So I don't know, man. I think it's important that the young people, they love whatever kind of hip hop they love.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that it'll do what it's supposed to do. But with technology the way it is today, luckily people my age can still not only create the type of hip hop that we want to create, but we still get great new records from all the artists that we love that are still out here doing it. So, man, I think there's something for everybody.
No, I can appreciate it, especially as the world continues to grow. And I like the way that you look at it, because you got to mold with the universe, right? You can't force yourself upon the universe. I always tell people, I was like, yo, man, like you cannot try to fight the universe. Like, you ain't gonna win. You ain't gonna win. So put your energy into where you really need to, to put it in. What do you feel the biggest challenges have been for you as an independent artist?
The money.
Yeah, facts, bro.
There's no doubt about it. It's expensive. If you want to do all this stuff, I mean, the promotional side is certainly expensive, but the creative side is expensive as well. If you want good beats, fully licensed to you, if you want quality time recording with great engineers, if you want good videographers that know what they're doing. I mean, all that stuff costs money, so you got to be ready to really put your money where your mouth is, man.
Man, true fucking story. And I want to touch on the engineer real quick. I want your thoughts on the engineer, because the layman out there, right? When they hear something, in a lot of cases, it's really, oh, it's the lyrics and it's the beat. That's what they're hearing, right?
Right.
Some people can't hear the breakdown and different, layers of the music. How important is the engineer in your mind?
Yeah.
Because shout out to the engineers out there as well, because I don't think in general a lot of engineers get a lot of credit, but that's my opinion. I'm curious of just what the importance to having the right engineer,
it's huge. I mean, it's, and I think it depends artist to artist. For me personally, a lot of times, especially if I have a great engineer who knows the creativity side of what I'm doing, they can tell me when I need to switch something up or change something, and they're usually right. And I'm willing always to listen to that, especially as I develop a trusting relationship with them. I think a lot of my songs would have ended up different without, I've been going to 64111 studio downtown.
Yep.
Just fantastic. Jazz is incredibly good. I've had some others in California and in Arizona that are good. And then I've had others where I'm just like, yeah, I wasn't feeling it, because sometimes you don't get that reciprocation. And I don't know about for everybody, but for me at least, you want to feel that the person that's sitting on the other side is attentive and they're watching creatively, with the creative eye. So,
man, it comes back to that team concept, which I think is very, very important. Any final things that you want to share with the outsiders? Definitely, again, let them know. We're going to put all your information into this conversation. Make sure people know, again, where they can find you. But any final thoughts, or where you want to let people know to most find you as far as where you're most active?
Yeah, I mean, all the social media platforms, all the music platforms. I'd say the last thing I'd want to say is, just kind of reiterate what I said earlier, man. If you're from Kansas City and you're doing hip hop or R&B or anything really artistic, get with the other people who are doing it, because there's so much going on here, and it should be good vibes everywhere.
And I can appreciate that very much. Well, from everybody here on the We Outside Live, we appreciate the time. Very much a privilege, again, as we said at the top of the conversation. We thank you, bro. I mean, you could have spent your time anywhere else today. Before you head into the Chiefs game as well.
Chiefs.
So, much love, much respect. Everybody, thank you for tuning in with us. Hey, man, y'all know what to do. We outside. We got Kaz right here with us, and there's a lot more to come, but we got just like Slim out right now. Hip Hop Head is out right now. There's some other things going on in the background that we stayed hush-hush on in this conversation. So again, all this information is going to be right here for you. Go follow the man. He is a hip hop head. He sticks to the principles of what it is, and it's authentic.
Thank you, sir.
What more can you ask for, brother? Appreciate you, man. Thank you very much.
Good to go.
And stream perfect.